If you've ever gone out of your way to help someone without expecting anything in return, only to have that kindness come back to you tenfold, then you'll understand exactly what happened to me. Before I dive into this incredible story, take a second to hit that like button and subscribe. Trust me, you'll want to stick around until the very end to see how a simple act of decency changed not just one life, but three. It started on a rainy Friday night last October. I was working late at Marshall & Sons Engineering, finishing up some blueprints that couldn't wait until Monday. The office had cleared out hours ago, except for Greg Harmon, our senior project manager. Greg was having a rough time lately, pressure from upper management, deadlines piling up, and rumors of layoffs hanging over everyone's heads. When I finally packed up around 9 p.m., I found Greg in the break room, slumped over a desk with an almost empty bottle of whiskey beside him. I'd never seen him like this before. Greg was usually the composed one, the guy who held everything together when projects went sideways. "Hey, man," I said, gently shaking his shoulder. "You okay?" Greg looked up at me with bloodshot eyes. "Alex," he slurred. "Just having a little celebration. You know Davis rejected our proposal again? Third time this month." I sighed. The Davis account was huge, and we'd been chasing it for nearly a year. "Come on, I'll drive you home." Getting Greg to my car was no small feat. He was a big guy, easily 6'3", and carrying most of his weight as dead weight. The rain had picked up, drenching us both as we stumbled through the parking lot. "My car," Greg mumbled. "You can get it tomorrow." "No way you're driving tonight." I didn't know Greg that well outside of work. We'd been colleagues for 2 years, occasionally grabbed lunch together, but never really hung out. I knew he lived in Oak Ridge Hills, about 30 minutes from downtown, and had a wife and 2 kids. That was about it. As I drove through the stormy night, Greg drifted between consciousness and sleep, occasionally mumbling about the Davis account and how he was letting everyone down. I tried reassuring him, but he was too far gone to really hear me. When we finally pulled into his driveway, the porch light flicked on immediately. A woman appeared at the door, petite with dark hair pulled back in a messy bun. Her face was etched with worry that transformed into disappointment when she saw the state of her husband. "I'm Alex," I said as I helped Greg toward the door. "We work together. He had a rough night." "I'm Sarah," she replied, holding the door open. This is becoming a pattern lately. Together, we managed to get Greg inside and onto the couch. He was practically unconscious by then. Sarah covered him with a throw blanket, her movements gentle despite her obvious frustration. "I'm sorry about this," I said awkwardly, standing in their living room, rainwater dripping from my jacket onto their hardwood floor. Sarah looked exhausted. Not just tired from the late hour, but worn down in a deeper way. "Don't apologize. Thank you for bringing him home safely. Would you like some coffee? You're soaked." I should have declined and headed home, but something in her expression made me say yes. While she busied herself in the kitchen, I noticed the photos lining their walls, Greg and Sarah on their wedding day, grinning at each other, 2 children growing up through a progression of school pictures, family vacations at beaches and mountains. Sarah returned with 2 steaming mugs. "The kids are finally asleep upstairs. They wanted to wait up for their dad, but..." She trailed off, glancing at Greg's unconscious form. "It's been a tough time at work," I offered, not sure if I was excusing his behavior or just filling the silence. "It's been a tough time everywhere," Sarah replied. There was no bitterness in her voice, just a profound tiredness. We sat at their kitchen table, the rain drumming against the windows. Sarah stared into her coffee for a long moment before speaking. "Greg wasn't always like this. When we met in college, he was so passionate, so driven. He wanted to design buildings that would change skylines." She smiled faintly at the memory. "Somewhere along the way, that got lost. The mortgage, the kids' school fees, the promotions that came with golden handcuffs. I nodded, unsure what to say. My own career was just taking off. I didn't have the pressures Greg was facing. I'm sorry, Sarah said suddenly. You didn't come here for our life story. It's okay, I assured her. Sometimes it helps to talk. Something broke in Sarah's expression then. No one asks anymore. His friends, my friends, everyone's so busy with their own struggles. Sometimes I feel like we're drowning and no one notices. For the next hour, Sarah told me about their life. How Greg had been passed over for promotion twice last year. How their son Dylan was struggling with math and needed a tutor they could barely afford. How her own dreams of returning to photography had been indefinitely postponed. She spoke without self-pity, just stating facts, occasionally checking on Greg who hadn't stirred. I worry about him, she admitted. He's not handling the stress well. I've suggested therapy, but men in our field aren't great about asking for help, I finished for her. Sarah nodded, then glanced at the clock. It was past midnight. I've kept you too long. Not at all. I'm glad we talked. As I stood to leave, Sarah disappeared into another room. She returned with a small, wrapped package. I want you to have this, she said, pressing it into my hands. For bringing Greg home safely, and for listening. Not many would have done either. I tried to refuse, but she insisted. Please. It would mean a lot to me. On the drive home, the package sat on my passenger seat. I was curious but waited until I was back in my apartment to open it. Inside was a framed photograph, a stunning black and white image of the city skyline at dawn, the first light breaking through storm clouds, reflecting off glass buildings. It was beautiful, capturing both fragility and strength. A note was tucked into the frame, Alex, sometimes kindness comes when we need it most. This was the last photo I took before putting my camera away. Thank you for reminding me that there's still beauty in unexpected places. When things get dark, remember that light always returns. Sarah. I later learned that Sarah had been a promising photographer before setting aside her career to support Greg's and raise their children. That photograph had won a local competition years ago. It was her prized work. The next morning, I called a friend who worked at Davis Corporation. I'd never leveraged our friendship for work before, but something pushed me to try now. Can you give our proposal another look? I asked. There's a lot riding on this for our team. 2 weeks later, Davis signed with us. Greg was given lead on the project, a career-saving opportunity. He never mentioned that night again, and I didn't bring it up. But things changed between us. He started leaving the office at reasonable hours. He talked about his kids more. And slowly, the weight that had been crushing him seemed to lift. 6 months later, I received an invitation to a gallery opening. Sarah Harmon was exhibiting her photography for the first time in 8 years. The featured piece was that same skyline, now titled, After the Storm. When I arrived, Sarah was surrounded by admirers. Greg stood proudly at her side, completely sober and beaming with genuine happiness. Their children were darting through the crowd, excited and proud. Sarah spotted me and broke away to greet me. None of this would have happened without that night, she said quietly. You did more than drive Greg home. You reminded me that sometimes we need to accept help, and sometimes we need to reclaim what makes us whole. That night taught me that the smallest actions, driving someone home, listening without judgment, extending kindness without expectation, can trigger changes that ripple outward in ways we never imagine. Sarah's thank you wasn't just the photograph. It was showing me how a single act of decency can help mend what's broken in others, and sometimes, in ourselves. Greg and Sarah are doing well now. He got that promotion eventually, and she's building a new career that honors her passion. Their kids are thriving. And me? I keep that photograph on my wall where I can see it every day. It reminds me that when everything seems darkest, Dawn is just waiting for its moment to break through. If you've stayed with me until now, thank you. Sometimes the most powerful stories aren't about dramatic rescues or grand gestures, but about those quiet moments when we choose to see each other's humanity. If this story touched you, please consider sharing it with someone who might need to hear it today. Because you never know, your small act of kindness might be the light someone else is waiting for.